My podcast story is going to be the most boring story of all your guests because I sit back sometimes and I think about like the Joe Rogan podcast and I think about how is Joe Rogan making all this money every day just talking? My brain's just like,
William Kennedy is managing partner at Ardan Labs.
Best known for Go training, with additional offerings in Rust and Kubernetes.
I've spent over a decade making sure people can trust that when Bill Kennedy's writing something or he's on stage, this isn't going to be a sales marketing job. This is going to be Bill interacting one-on-one with you. The less I know about you, the better. I love being ignorant about the guest as much as I can. It's funny, right? Because I get to explore who they are from a very neutral space. I wonder, will I reach a certain number of guests where it starts to...
Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Bill, can you tell me your podcast story, please?
My podcast story is going to be the most boring story of all your guests because I'm not doing this for money, right? So my company, Ardan Labs, we are a training/consulting company in the Go programming, Rust programming, Kubernetes sort of space. That's where our niche is. For people who don't know tech, pretty much you cannot access a website today whose backend isn't written in probably Go or Rust. Like, this is the language, though. Now with a lot of AI systems, people are going back to another programming language called Python. So that's my company. And my company is really about helping people just be better engineers. And so a lot of the time that I spend is around content, right? But not creating content that is selling. It's creating content that's helping people with the idea that there's karma involved. So if I help enough people, like genuinely help enough people, then that will somehow come back in return with training dollars, consulting dollars, that kind of thing. From a business perspective, it's a content game. It's two things. It's a content game and then being present physically wherever people are. I've written well over 100 blog posts. I've written 2 books. I'm doing a constant amount of video now because just writing is really hard and I'm kind of burnt out on the writing. I could share with you a little project I'm working on to sort of solve that. And I always wanted to do a podcast, and I thought, okay, I could produce more content if we did a podcast, but I didn't want to do a traditional podcast. We get some guests for some tech I wanted to hear people's stories. So the podcast started off with my friends or people I knew online through the Go community, sort of telling their stories. And then suddenly, I don't know who's listening to my podcast, to be honest with you, because I'm not marketing it. I'm not sort of promoting it. Like even my marketing team, other than something on X and LinkedIn every other week when we publish things, it's like a small piece of everything, right? And now I'm getting people whose job it is to get others on podcasts, I guess. I don't know. I got a handful of these people that sort of showed up, and they're sending me really interesting guests, people that are sort of outside of my community. And even if it's not tech, but most people are in tech at some level, right? Though I'm dealing with CTOs and CEOs now and stuff. What's interesting is everybody's story is both the same and different, which I can't sort of explain, right? Like everybody has a very similar story when you start talking about high school and going to college and their first jobs, but at the same time, it's also very unique and it's just super interesting. And so the podcast has sort of shifted maybe from talking to pure engineers to talking to just about anybody who wants to jump on and tell their story. And it's really about, from a business perspective, for me, it's about producing content and having it out there so people know I exist. And then it's a personal thing for me because I get to hear these cool stories and meet people I wouldn't have otherwise met. I'm very anti-advertisement on everything I do. Even on my website, they wanted to put like ads around my blog posts, and I screamed and yelled because I think that eliminates trust from people. And I've spent over a decade making sure people can trust that when Bill Kennedy's writing something or he's on stage or he's doing something, this isn't going to be a sales marketing job. This is going to be Bill interacting one-on-one with you to try to impart some knowledge and help you, right? And so again, no advertisements, no, like, not even art and stuff. I scream if I see it. Now, they slip it in every once in a while because I don't listen to every single show, right? And then I explode sometimes, but that's not what this podcast is for, you know? And trust me, I sit back sometimes and I think about like the Joe Rogan podcast and I think about how is Joe Rogan making sort of all this money every day just talking. And I've listened to a couple of his shows. I don't hear advertisements and stuff even on his stuff, I don't think. If they are, it's small. I listened to him on a couple of car rides. I had to stop after 3 shows because everybody just wants to talk to him about MMA at some point, and that just gets old, right? Like, he's gotta figure out how to do a show that doesn't end up talking about fighting, and I enjoy the MMA, but how many times can that come up, right? So I got sort of disconnected. But it's mind-blowing to me how like, I don't know where the money's coming from for even if you look at, like, a Howard Stern, who's been doing it forever, and then he jumps over to Sirius Radio, right? Like, they wanna pay him hundreds of millions of dollars. My brain's just like, I don't understand. Are they trying to get subscriptions? Are they like, whatever that model is, right? But I'll tell you this, I book a show much like we did this, right? Like, "Hey, do you have time? You have time now? Let's go, let's do it," right?
Yeah.
My life is so haphazard that even if somebody came in and offered me $10 million a year to do a show, and I had to be every single day at a desk, I'd say no. I give kudos to Joe Rogan, and I give kudos to those guys that are willing to basically upheave their lives to be somewhere at the same time every day because you lose freedom. Let's not kid ourselves, right? It doesn't matter if he's sick. It doesn't matter if he wants to go take a trip. He's locked in at a desk 5 days a week now, whether he likes it or not, right? Like, to me, it's a prison sentence. Now, I get the money and I'm going to do it for 4 years and I'm going to be set. Fine, whatever. But I think at 55, with the way my life now is, maybe if I was in my 30s, who cares? But that's a prison sentence, dude, right? I mean, think about it. Anyway, I hope that answers a little bit of the question.
It does, and you're giving me so much here, Bill, which I love, and we're gonna follow up on a few of those. So I hope for Joe, I'm not listening to him as much as I used to. I hope for Joe that he likes what he's doing. I think he does, right? It's like just interacting with people, being genuinely curious. I mean, when you get what is it, 9 figures deal for your podcast with Spotify, you probably do the effort of sitting with somebody for 3 hours a day and talking to him. But I think he likes it.
Oh, no, you better like it, right?
Exactly.
Because,
Exactly.
I mean, I don't care which way you shape it. I guess it's like what we used to do when we were young, 9 to 5, go to a cubicle. I mean, I did that for 20 years. I didn't consider it a prison sentence. I considered it a paycheck. But I guess I was younger then. I don't know how old Joe Rogan is. Maybe he's got nothing else really going on. I mean, I don't know, dude. But it's interesting, right? That's the way I look at it at this point.
Joe is 58, apparently.
See, 58, dude. He's older than me, man. I don't know. At some point he's gonna have to like just say, I want to do something else tomorrow, right? I don't know. Maybe money drives you. I don't need to make $100 million in my lifetime. I think
Just 5.
that's ridiculous.
Just the first 5.
5. I just need 5. I need 5. If I can be $5 million liquid cash in the bank, I'm done. I've structured my entire life around that. I really have. No matter how much money I make, my day-to-day life is structured around 5, and that means like say 5% a year on that, right? 250,000 a year. My entire life is structured on that. Everything else is gravy. But if the world comes to an end tomorrow, right? I'm going to be fine because I'm not living a life that requires a 500,000 like fixed. We're talking mortgages and cars. And I just met a guy that I talked to on a podcast who since 2006 has been a nomad. He has basically traveled right now he's in Italy, right? He's a journalist, him and his wife. And he told me one of the advantages of this, other than that, right? And he'll stay someplace for months. It's not like he's bouncing every 3 days. But he said something to me that was really interesting. He said, when the money's good, right? He's making money as a journalist. He's living in Venice. But when things start to go wrong, he might move to Nicaragua, where his money goes really long because he doesn't have any fixed bills. And so if the world comes to an end tomorrow, he owes nobody nothing other than maybe the Airbnb that he's currently in, right? Like, how amazing is that? He could basically live on, I don't know, 50,000 a year, 40,000 a year, 30,000 a year, just by moving freely to an area where the dollar just goes farther, right? Now, I don't know if I can live like a nomad, and they've been doing it for 20 years, but
Yeah, there is a lifestyle for everybody, I guess. And if you're happy and comfortable with yours, why not? What's in it for you though, Bill? Because and we're gonna get back to this on like the length of your episodes, right? You typically do rather long-ended episodes, an hour and a half plus. There must be something in for you. I mean, you've published, what is it, 130, 140 episodes by now?
I honestly don't know.
I understand you want to give back, you want to help people become better engineers, you want to put content out there, create good karma. I get it. But what's in it for you at the end of the day, though?
It's another way of creating content where people can sort of find us and hopefully over time trust us enough to ask us if we could help them. It's another way. It's diverse, right? You have to diversify everything, even in business, right? You can't just stay with the Go programming language. I have to be, and these are marathons. These are not sprints. When you want to bring another technology in, it takes years, 2, 3 years for people to begin to see you as either an expert or trust. And so even the podcast at this point, I don't know how long I've been doing it. Maybe it's wild. Maybe it's been 3 years, right? And now other people are starting to find it, and there's trust in that because they hear it. So everything is a marathon. Nothing's a sprint. But since I wanted to produce more content, and it had to be different content, and the podcast was fun. I'm doing the podcast the way I want. So that's why it's long form. That's why it's a minimal hour and a half, 2 hours with every guest, which goes by like this when you're doing it, right? You don't even feel it. Good for long car drives and stuff. So see, that's the cool part. I don't care if the industry says that format is no good. I don't care that people have short attention spans. I don't care that, you know, 20 minutes and that's all you get. I don't care because it's not going to be a little hurtful. It's not for you. It's for me. I'm doing this for me. And this is a format that I like. And who cares if it takes you 3 days to listen to this because you only have 20 minutes at a time. And I know people are sort of doing that, right? When it comes to a stage talk, I have different opinions because I feel like if you've never given a talk before, nobody should ever do more than a 20-minute talk. You can sit through a bad 20-minute talk. You can. You can't sit longer than that if the talk is bad. So talks are a little different. For this sort of long form sort of podcast, even my wife, I don't know what podcast she listens to, but she has the headphones on all day while she's doing things around the house and she's listening to stuff. Those longer form ones, the guys that are talking news or politics or stories. So, I mean, I guess these are out there. They're not necessarily out there in the tech space, but they're out there.
I like how genuine you are about just putting content out there and doing this for yourself. What are some of the challenges that you face with the podcast, though? And to put a bit of context around all this, you've published 136, last time I checked, episodes live out there. So you stayed consistent for you started in 2025, so it's going to be almost 6 years now. How do you stay consistent? What challenges have you faced? And what kept you going? You mentioned burnout with written content, right? With the blog. How come this is not burning you out? And how do you do to stay consistent with it?
There's a couple things I did with this one to make sure that I could keep doing it. One, it's not live, so I don't have to worry about scheduling around it. This is live, but we planned this on Monday, right? Like I can do that. But if you had to be every day, like I do a live coding show Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 1. And my entire month of October now, I'm going to be traveling. I think I'm going to be home for like 5 days next month. So how do you do a podcast when you're not going to be home for a month? So one of the strategies that I did is I said, we're going to release every other week, because then what that means is I can find a free block of 2 weeks when I'm home. I could do 5 or 6 shows back to back, right? Just have a week where I'm doing 2 shows a day. Now I got 8 shows in the can. Do the math. That's 16 weeks. And
Gravy.
so, right. It's like, so now for the next month and a half, I don't have to think about the podcast. I can do other things. And so, but as we get close, I tell Kevin, my producer, let me know when I got 2 shows in the can, and then I'll schedule 3 or 4 at a time. And so there's no burnout per se with that. It's just a matter of going, okay, this is going to be podcast week. And then I don't have to worry about it again for a month and a half. And so that's been sort of one strategy. At the beginning of the year, I tried to go 2 every week. And I started feeling bad for the guests, because I wasn't just my friends now I was talking to, I was talking to other people, and they're like, when is my show going to be out? And I'd have to say in 2 months, and they'd be like, ah. So I thought maybe I got to go every week, but that became stress. That started to become stressful every week, because I just lost my sort of cushion. And so then during the summer, when I knew I was going to travel, we went back to every other week, and I've just sort of stayed there. That's one way to sort of eliminate the stress. So right now, I'm going to travel the whole month of October. I've got shows ready to go all the way through about mid-November, and then I'll start getting on, doing it. But think about it. If I do 2 or 3 shows a week, I'm a month, 6 weeks. I don't have to think about it, right? So it's been the strategy for don't get me wrong. There are just times where I just feel like, why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? Like, I'm putting all this time into it. I'm not going to do advertising with it. And I don't look at the marketing numbers. I'm probably one of the few people you're going to talk to. I couldn't tell you what the numbers are. I get shocked. Yeah, I get shocked when somebody reaches out and says, I heard your show and I'd love to be the journalist was somebody. And this guy's been a journalist for a long time. And he's like, oh, I heard your show. I want to be on your show. All right, do you want to be on my show? I don't care. Let's go. Like, yeah, let's do it. I'm not like selective. So I don't know how people are finding it. I don't know how many people are actually listening to it. I do know that we're on all the major platforms, so that's kind of cool. But I don't know if it's sad that I don't know
It's
these
not,
things, and
man.
you're talking to me.
The sheer amount of people that I talk to that who have no clue about their stats and the data behind their podcast. Some people just see some direct effect of it and they're like happy with that. Other people just see an indirect effect and are happy with that. Some people just do it for the pleasure of the game. And it's like, yeah, I like to record, I like to talk to people. Every once in a while, I get somebody to reach out to work with me. And that's enough. And if that's enough and that makes you, happy or fulfilled, then so be it. That's what podcast also is about. I think we put too much pressure around, you need to do that. This is how you grow a show. This is what you're going to get out of it. But yeah, whatever works for you. The thing I always say to people wanting to start a podcast is, because the question is, how many episodes should I publish a month, right? This is the most recurring one. I'm like, whatever amount will allow you to keep going on for a long time. The amount of episode that is sustainable for you. And of course, the more episodes you publish, the more traction you will get, the more momentum. But if that momentum dies out after a couple of months because you just can't do 2 episodes a week, then this won't work long term anyways. And this is what podcast is.
I just think that whatever you publish, you should do it on a very sort of fixed sort of daytime sort of schedule, because that at least gives people some anticipation. Oh, is this the other Wednesday? Okay, this is going to drop, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to it's completely random. That I don't agree with. But if you're dropping blog posts, or you're doing live video stuff like I do, or podcasts, so we drop on every other Wednesday, I think by noon Eastern time. And that I think you do need. I think you want that cadence and that sort of time slot. But Europe gets interesting, right? Because I always liked sort of dropping things at around 9 a.m. on the East Coast, right? Because it's still 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Europe. So they could still see it today. And California is just waking up, but they're going to see it in 3 hours anyway.
Yeah.
Like for me, noon, like sometimes they drop this at noon. I mean, everybody's gone home at that point in Europe. They're not going to see it. And with the way social media algorithms work, unless somebody's really following you, they may not see it at all in Europe anymore because it's already sort of gone through the wash, right? I don't say anything to the team because, again, this particular podcast, I'm not trying to say get European developers to be listening to it. If it's a technical blog or something, I'd be a little bit up more like, hey, you got to do this at 9 a.m., not at 12 p.m. But I don't think people sometimes recognize the fact that if you've got something that's global, and you should only be doing things that are global. I learned that on my first business. You shouldn't be doing things that are just so hyper local anymore. You should be doing things that are global at this point. That you got to think about what time you release something. And so the entire planet, even Bali, halfway around the world, is a 12-hour difference. So if I do it at 9 a.m. on the East Coast, somebody over there could technically still be up because they haven't gone to sleep yet. And they could potentially see it, but the washing machine, it doesn't run that much while they're, you see what I'm saying? I've had to think about time zones quite a bit over the last 12 years, bouncing all over the planet. So I think time is really important, especially in the US. If you're going after West Coast, East Coast, 3 hours doesn't seem like a lot, but everybody's at a different point in their life every 3 hours. And so how do you capture everybody at the same, at a good moment, not the same moment, right? My lunchtime is their breakfast time over there, right? Me winding down at 3 is they're in the middle of their day. So like you don't think about these things, right? But you have to.
I'm coming from Europe. I'm coming from France, as people might hear with the accents. Now in the US, and this hits me even more. The first moment I really realized that was when I had to think when I wanted to publish my LinkedIn posts. I think with podcasts, it's a bit different. So you touched upon two things here, Bill. The first one is consistency. So I 100% agree with you. You must be consistent. When I said you should go for the number of episodes that you feel comfortable sustaining for the long term, this also means that you feel comfortable being consistent with in the long term, whether that be one episode per week, 2 episodes per month, 1 episode per month. You want to keep it consistent because you want people to know when to expect a new episode. The idea is also to get a compounding, like make it a habit for people to listen to you. And you do that by publishing same day of the week, same time of the day in a consistent manner. Time zone is interesting. Our US clients like to publish very, very early. I think there is culturally, the US wakes up a bit earlier, finishes work a bit earlier as well. So that makes sense. And this allows them to be live in UK, Europe for the English-speaking people around noon, which makes sense to me. But then whatever works your boat, the best thing to do for people really wanting to drill on that is to test and iterate, right? Take a 3-month period, publish for a month at a certain time, another month at a certain time, and you will see how many people listen to it in the first 24 hours. Because at the end of the day, the loyal audience will come back to you anyways, right? I know that Bill publishes, say, Tuesday, right? But my podcasting time is Saturday morning when I go to the gym, and I listen to it then. But having that consistency is good for sure. You've spoken about good karma when I first asked you the question, tell me your podcast story. Did you witness some of this good karma? Like, have you been able to see direct or indirect good karma from the podcast and putting out those 1.5 hour episodes live for people to become data engineers?
I think every business that I'm in, I base it on karma. I honestly believe that,
Yes.
right? I believe that if you put good energy out and you help people, that over time, that comes back. You don't see it immediately, but a year can go by and you can think about all the positive things that happened and the people that were involved, and then you can start sort of connecting those dots. I think if you're just out there driving sales and driving marketing and just put you might get some, but again, everything has to look not like a sprint. Everything's a marathon here. And so everything I do is about being good to people, being positive with people. I get people from all over the planet, people who have lost their jobs, people who are in third world countries, people that are struggling and need the training. And everybody knows this when I'm out. I always say, look, I got to put milk on the table, but I know the price of this stuff is fairly high, the stuff that I'm selling from a video training perspective. And if your company can pay for it, please ask them to. But if they can't, I'll charge you what you can afford. I'm not looking to charge you beyond that. For some people, the answer is zero. I can't afford anything right now. It's $20. Some people can afford 200. And I'd rather have 10% of a million than 0% of 100 mil, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think that's the karma, right? Karma is this person that I charged $200 to, maybe one day ends up becoming a director. They have the ability to make financial decisions. They need help. Maybe not. There's no guarantee,
Yeah.
right? So I just ask people all the time to, if I'm helping you, then your job is to basically help somebody else when that moment comes. And it may not be me, but just, I forgot how they call that term, but just like return that favor at some point. And that's all. But I've learned over the years that for my business, right, from an engineering business, the people that are just engineers today, some percent of them are going to move up into management. Some of them are going to move up into executive management. And at some point, they're going to need help. And in many cases, they remember me and they reach out. And I can't always help them, but I got the phone call. And that's, to me, the karma part of it, right? You can't be looking so short term. You've got to look long term on everything. And people's lives are in different places at different times. And so you do everything you can to help somebody that's within reason. My business partner has to yell at me all the time. We're not a charity, we're a business, and that's fair. It's fair. But me giving away video doesn't cost me anything, honestly, right? It's not a physical cost to give you a coupon code. I like it's different if I had books, physical books, that physically cost me something. But giving you 20 hours of video, what does that cost me? Pennies or something, right? So you have to look at that too. But that's what I mean by the karma. Like your first priority needs to be helping people, not making money. The money will come. Like at least it's been my experience. The money will come if you're doing the right positive things and you're making the right decisions. The money will come. It will.
This ties back to a concept that we try to push in podcasting, which is building goodwill. At the end of the day, especially in B2B, people don't trust strangers on the internet anymore, right? 10 years ago, you could random some ads, have a 10K offer, and people will get into a call, potentially buy. Now it's much, much harder. People have been burned. People do due diligence. People will check you up online. And if they see that you've been providing value to the industry for the last 6 years with like hours of videos live, well, this definitely might help. And it's about building goodwill, sometimes making an ask, but letting people come to you, which is the power of podcasts, in my opinion. One of the things that we discussed during our pre-brief chat, Bill, was the power of being in person. It was particularly focused around conducting business, right? So not necessarily podcast, which is why I'm interested to get your take on this. So you record episodes, you're like recording remotely like we are right now. What's your take on in-person podcasting? Is that something that you do or want to do? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would love that, right? There's nothing better than being in a room. When I do training, okay, I have two choices. You can put me in front of a camera or you can bring me into a classroom. If you put me in front of a camera with 20 people, 5 people are going to turn their cameras on. And I'm going to interact with those 5 people. And it's going to be a struggle because the energy connection between me and you is all basically this visual of your face, and I can't really connect. I could try, I can get you to laugh and I can have these moments. But if you put me in a classroom, I can interact with all 20 of you. I
Yeah.
walk around the classroom. I can exchange energy. And I tell people, like I'm a vampire when I'm in the room. I'm going to suck all the energy out of this room. You're going to be exhausted at the end of the day because I'm going to feed your energy to give you more energy, right? But I know when somebody's tired. I know when somebody's disconnected. I know when something's confusing. I know everything when I'm in the room. And then I can be a better, say, teacher. I think it's the same in any sort of conversation. If we were sitting at a bar and we were having a conversation and I said something, maybe it's not in your face, but it's in your body. I said something that you didn't like. I said something that there's all these sort of interactions that even though we're looking at each other here, it's just there's no energy flow, right? I don't feel your energy on this beyond just seeing you. And so I think the format like a Joe Rogan has where that guest is there, I think can only enhance sort of the conversation because you're having that sort of real personal experience with that. You forget at times that the microphone is on and the camera's on. Even me right now talking to you, right? Sometimes you forget, but if you're in the same room, you completely forget, which is cool. I mean, if it's live, you gotta kind of keep in the back of your head, I guess. But I would love that. But I think that's harder to do unless you're at a Joe Rogan level where you have that studio and people are coming to you. If I was going to do podcasting at the Joe Rogan level, I'm not saying that money level. I'm talking this was going to be now my job 5 days a week. Then I would create a budget to bring people into a studio. I would create that budget to have them there. Right. Because I just think if that's your job to be podcast and that's where you want to make that money, then bringing people also, I think it adds more credibility. Anybody can do what we're doing right now, right? With a couple bucks. Anybody can
Yeah.
just start one of these like Riverside or like the Ecamm I was telling you at YouTube Live. Anybody can start doing this. But not everybody has the show where the guest shows up. That takes it to the next level. That's legit. That's real. Whether you have the full funding for that is irrelevant because you're creating the illusion that you do.
Which is a good thing in a sense, right? The fact that the barrier to entry is so low, allow anybody to start a podcast nowadays. There is literally no excuse. But then indeed, as you ramp up and as you get better, and if the objective of the podcast is authority, which is a different ballgame than what we have been talking so far, then yeah, for sure, you want to put in the means, you want to have a better production and post-production, because this is the name of the game. But the barrier to entry to at least test the format, iterate on it, learn from it, and get better is like solo, anybody can start a podcast. What would be some of your recommendations, speaking of which, Bill? So you've been doing it for so long in a very narrow niche, more for the pleasure of the game than for actual business behind it. But if you have to think, and let's take the tech space, right? If you have to think about companies who want to start a podcast because, like you, they see the benefits of it, they know they can get a content machine out of it, and if they do certain things, they can generate leads from it. What would be your recommendations? What's the number one thing that you would do if you were to start a podcast for a tech company right now?
Good, no different than what I'm doing now. I do not like the prep. I do not like the pre-interview. I don't like any of that because then you get on the show and it's like pre-scripted. Every time I get an email from a guest and they're like, um, here are some things I can talk about. And I'm like, I don't really care. That might come up. Like I'm the CEO, and we're going to launch a new product. And I say, you understand that when you get on this show, you may or may not have a chance to really talk about that. It all depends on where things are going. I'll ask you right in the beginning of the show, what are you doing today? There's your opportunity. We may or may not get back to that. In fact, now that you've told me this, I'm going to avoid it like the plague because that's not what this show is about, right? I'm not bringing you on here to market your company. I'm bringing you on here to talk about your life, and that company might be a part of it, right? It might be the current part of it. But if you are working on tech that's interesting to me, well, let's talk tech. You better be able to bring that too, because I'm technical enough to fish that out if you're doing marketing. So for me, it's about the less I know about you, the better. I've had people on my show where halfway through the interview, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know who this guy, like, this guy's for real. Like now I'm starting to be like the fanboy and I couldn't believe who I had on the show. Now I got to act cool again, like I don't know you, but how cool is it to be ignorant about somebody who's actually maybe done something that you really, really respect after you start realizing sort of who they are, right? And I think it's refreshing on the other side too, because I'm sure that this person is not used to somebody just talking to them like they're a regular, say, human being. And then you got to maintain that situation, right? So it sounds counterintuitive, but I think if you're going to be interviewing and talking to people, at least the way I do it, the less I know about you, the better. Because I want that to come out naturally in the conversation, and I want to be able to explore things. If when I know too much about you, I even find myself steering the car in that direction, and they've never been my best show. Now, if your podcast is all about marketing or a certain person and it's about their book, you better read that book and you better like be prepared. And so you got to figure out what your podcast is, but either be very, very prepared or just be very, very clueless. I like being on the plus, I'll be honest with you, because of my format, I don't have all this time I have to spend before we jump on the call, which is another thing I needed because I'm so busy. If you told me that I had 2 hours of prep before every, I wouldn't be here, right? Like, so I needed to find a format as well to do that. So you got to sort of figure that out and make sure you have enough time. But I love being ignorant about the guest as much as I can. It's funny, right? Because I get to explore who they are from a very neutral space.
Let me challenge that a bit, Bill. There is So I love the format. It's funny because we had a pre-brief call because I like to have the pre-brief calls. For me, it allows me to build rapport before we get into an interview. And I recommend it to people starting a podcast because that allows to have a without any pressure of the recording environment when you first talk to the guest, which can be beneficial. Now, as you get used to it, and if you know your guest can handle it, it's also fine to just go straight into recording. We had a few podcasts like this in the past. I like the pre-brief call, but I like unscripted, exactly like we're having right now, like a true conversation around an overarching product and theme, which is the podcast. Now, when I think about technology and potentially bigger corporations in technology, right? They can't really afford to have a speaker just go on a rumble and get hooked on a podcast recording without knowing what they're getting into. So yesterday I interviewed one of the highest people in the food chain of Citibank, and like the script for another podcast, the script was ultra polished because they have to, right? Otherwise they just can't. Their PR department, their communication department is never going to allow that. But adapting to that allows you to get this level of guest on the show, which means you get the exposure, you give them exposure, and this compounds as well. Do you take that into account at all for your podcast, or potentially when you think about how others should do their podcast? Or for you, should it always be as natural and unscripted as possible?
For the show that I'm doing,
Yeah,
I need it as natural and as unscripted as possible.
fair enough.
I don't even look up at the company website you're at until you're on. During the show, I'll bring it up. I've learned that the less I know about you, the better the show is going to be. Because I might even go down paths that one, originally maybe you didn't want anybody to go down, but it's come up in conversation and you'll follow that path with me. Don't get me wrong, I've missed things that come up later, but I've always had this philosophy, whether I'm on stage, I'm teaching, or the podcast. If I missed something, one, nobody knows that I missed it. And two, the universe just said it wasn't important that day, or it wasn't important in that hour. And so not to stress that you forgot to say something, because if you were meant to say it, the universe would have popped it back in your head. So there's a reason why you sort of forgot to ask that question, and not to beat yourself up over it because it just wasn't meant to be in that sort of moment. That I truly sort of believe, right? But like the podcast you're talking about with that high-end executive, they've chosen to go on because they had a very specific purpose. They needed to talk about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that's what they're, say, paying you to be on for. And you have to be highly prepared for that. If you would be very unprofessional to not do that, right? But that's what that podcast is about. The listeners know that going in, and that's what they sort of want to hear. In engineering, there's this concept of purpose. What is the purpose of this? If you can't tell me what the purpose of something is, you can't possibly build it properly because you don't understand its purpose. And so every podcast has its purpose, and you need to follow that purpose or that podcast is going to be failing. And the podcast that I do, the purpose is to have a raw conversation that can go anywhere at any given time. And the less I know about you, the better that show is going to be.
Absolutely love that. One thing that I like to ask my guests to wrap up those interviews, Bill, is the following. Actually, I think you like it because I don't know if he's an engineer actually, but definitely he had lots of engineers helping him out. So Jeff Bezos, right, when he was building Amazon, he wasn't trying to guess what's going to change in 10 years or what's going to be the next innovation in 10 years, what's going to be the next disruption in 10 years. Instead, he was asking himself, what is true today that will still be true in 10 years, that we should double down on right now? Well, people are still going to want fast shipping. They're still going to want large amount of choices, ideally with cheap ones. They're still going to want great customer service. So if we double down, and he always talks about customer service, customer experience, customer service. If we double down on those three, we're going to be successful in 10 years. Bringing that to podcasts, what would that be? And I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to say, you can't say that your podcast need to be unscripted and natural. I want something else, another advice.
No, I think for me, as it relates to the podcast, it's going to have to be, this is what I'm monitoring, at least. Okay. I'm bringing on different guests every other week. I'm asking them to tell their story from the time they're in high school to where they are today. And like I said, I think there are these 4 or 5 similar stories that sort of you start out at a certain point and you end up at a certain point. The general theme of this person's life is there's about 4 or 5 of these sort of themes, but they all sort of bounce a little bit differently. What I wonder is, will I reach a certain number of guests where it starts to get boring? I've heard that story already, right? Is there, or is this like a snowflake where I can talk to a million people and even though there's 4 or 5 general themes, every story is still unique, every story is still interesting, and we learn a little bit more about each sort of person. I don't know the answer to that. There are days where I'm like, we've seen all the snowflakes, there's no more. And then there are other days where I'm like, no, every person's gonna sort of add an element to the story. Because I think from a podcast perspective, it ends when people are bored. And I gave you the Joe Rogan story, right? I listened to 3 shows and then I got bored. I really did. Because if I had to hear him talk about MMA one more time, I was going to shoot myself. And I moved on. I had a 14-hour car drive and I think he lasted 3 hours in that car drive. And halfway through that other show, I turned it off. Now, there's a show I love listening to called Coast to Coast. It's Coast to Coast AM. They talk about all the crazy things, man, UFOs and psychics and I just love listening to these guests, right?
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, even after 3 hours of that, it all starts to blend together, right? And so, and they've been doing it since the 80s, right? I mean, nonstop. I think for me, it's not what are people's always going to need great shipping. I think people are always going to want to feel entertained and that every guest is bringing something unique. And it's my job to pull that out because I'm the one asking the questions, right? It's my job to find that little thing they just sort of skipped over. Whoa, 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 no, no, no. We got to get back to that, right? I love when the guest says to me, no, that's a great question. I haven't thought about that. Now I know I've hit something unique and real because I've got something specific to this person, something they've said, and something that even in their own mind is sort of interesting about themselves. That's the moment I'm looking for in every podcast. And I tend to get it at least once on just about every show. So I guess for me, if I end up going 5 or 6 shows and that doesn't happen, either I'm failing and I should stop, or we've exhausted the set of potential stories and people and the snowflake, right? So I mean, that's what I'm looking at from the podcast perspective. I just don't want it to become boring, routine, where somebody's just like, I don't need to listen this week because I know what's going to happen. I know what they're going to talk about. They're going to talk about MMA.
You really have a thing against MMA. If it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's all right, or is it in
It's
the
all
same
the same
bucket?
thing to me. It's I don't have anything against the MMA. What I had against was every show having to spend an hour talking about it, right? And it's the example that I have in my head. Like, I don't want that to happen.
I love this take, and I usually don't, but I need to follow up on this one because I love it. I think there is an unlimited amount of stories out there. At the end of the day, for sure, everybody's coming more or less from the same place with a few tweaks and grow more or less the same way, but there's always going to be some elements of like their personal life that is affecting the whole thing and makes it unique. The best example I have of this is Dave Ramsey, right? Dave Ramsey has been, I don't know how old he is, but like for the last 40 years saying the same thing. Spend less than you are making. That's his message. And yes, yet he has one of the most successful personal finance shows and business in the US, right? Because at the end of the day, what people also want to hear is like the specific cases. Oh, what if the woman is making 200K a year and the man is a stay at home with the kids, but there is this debt on the car? Oh, what about this guy who is a business owner who's making $1 million a year, but the wife is spending $1 million too? And like all those people are going to be able to relate. There is a bit of like, there's a word for it in French, which is basically liking to see into personal lives of others, into the personal life of others. There's a bit of that, right? Like we want to see how people manage their finance.
Reality TV stuff.
Exactly. There's a bit of an element of that, but there is an infinite amount of like small tweaks to spend less than you're making. And this is why I think he's successful in the content. And he loves it, right? So he keeps talking about the same thing and this works. So I think it's possible to, keep on coming up with content, which is why I love the podcast format, because it is about people and there is an unlimited amount of stories. Well, eventually there is 9 billion stories in total for now. I'm never going to get to all of this. But yeah, I like the take of it.
I think that's the other part, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing that you have to also remember. And I do it with my stage talks,
Okay.
right? I tell people I have 4 or 5 talks that I can always give them, okay? But I tell people every year, develop one talk. And don't worry that you've given it 5 times. Because one, by the 5th time you give it, it's going to be the best. But everybody in that room probably hasn't seen it. It's new to them. Even though it's recorded, nobody goes online and watches the talks anyway, in all honesty. And so I have to apply that back to the podcast, right? Because that new person hasn't listened to the 137 other stories and probably are not going to listen to them. They're going to listen to the next 4 podcasts. And then somebody new is going to come in, right? Like, I doubt there's anybody on the planet who's listened to all 137 of these sort of podcasts. And so what you got to get back in your head is it's always that next show is going to be unique to somebody. It's the first time they're hearing that story, even though it's the 140th time you're hearing it at some level. It's the first time they're hearing it. And you have to keep that in your head while you're doing that show and not get depressed or started to nervous. I shouldn't say depressed. Get nervous that maybe this is duplicate content. It's not. It's the same thing with the stage talk. It's not.
Amen to that. Bill, this was a great unscripted podcast conversation. Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. If people want to find out more about you, listen to you, have an unscripted conversation with a stranger about engineering, or find out more about you, where should they go?
Ardan, Ardan Labs. Ardan Labs. You can always look up Bill or William Kennedy, Miami on Google. You'll find me there. Email is bill@ardanlabs.com. Send me an email. You're only bothering me if you don't bother me. So send me that email, man. And I'll talk to you. I'll talk to everybody.
I will put all the links in the description. Bill, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.